throwaway account because, honestly, I don't need this link to my main. So, buckle up, because this is one of those stories that sounds fake, but I swear on my morning coffee, it's real. Or at least, real enough to make you question humanity. I recently heard about this guy, let's call him Avi, who pulled off one of the ballsiest and dumbest stunts I've ever heard. Dude faked his dad's death to get sympathy points and worm his way into an Ivy League college. Yeah, you heard that right, he straight up forged documents, staged phone calls, even had a whole fake funeral program printed out. At first, people were eating it up. Teachers, counselors, admissions officers, everyone was falling over themselves to help him. Poor kid, they said. So much potential, so much tragedy. He even got a few scholarships tossed his way because, exceptional hardship or whatever. Looking back now, there were definitely red flags. Like, he always dodged questions when people asked stuff like, "How are you holding up?" or "Can we send flowers to your family?" Avi would just get all weird and change the subject. But no one wanted to push too hard because, well, grief is messy. And the craziest part? He eventually confessed, not in person, not to his school, not even to his family. He confessed on Reddit. On a freaking confessions subreddit. Like it was some edgy little secret he just had to get off his chest at 2 a.m. But the internet? The internet is not your therapist, bro. Turns out, the mod of that subreddit was not just your average live laugh love kind of guy. Nope. This dude actually tipped off US authorities. And now, Avi? He's being deported back to India. Talk about catching an Udta tear straight in the ass. If you don't know Hindi, it basically means getting hit by an arrow you never saw coming. Anyway, that's just the beginning. Shit gets so much worse from here. Stick around. So after Avi posted his little "Forgive Me" Reddit sob story, thinking he could just unburden his soul and move on, he woke up the next morning to absolute hell breaking loose. The mods had already flagged his post. Some anonymous tip got sent to some official-looking inbox. Next thing you know, there's a formal investigation launched into his college application. At first, Avi thought he could just delete the post and pretend nothing happened. Nope. Internet's forever, buddy. Screenshots were already circulating faster than gossip in a small town. And then, this is where it gets spicy, his university actually called him in for a routine meeting. Except it wasn't routine. He walked into a room with 2 university officials and a guy in a suit. Badge flashing. Stern faces. No coffee offered. You know you're screwed when nobody even pretends to be polite anymore. Apparently, the grieving son was now officially under investigation for fraud. Scholarships? Revoked. Admission? Under review. Visa? Now hanging by a thread. And Avi? Sitting there like a deer in headlights, realizing he'd basically pressed the self-destruct button on his own life. He told me later, through someone else, obviously, I'm not friends with him, that at that moment, it felt like the ground literally disappeared under his feet. Shock first. Then terror. Then, just this bone-deep, icy kind of sadness. The kind where you know you did this to yourself, and nobody's coming to save you. And buddy, this was only the beginning of the emotional freefall. So after Avi posted his little "Forgive Me" Reddit sob story, thinking he could just unburden his soul and move on, he woke up the next morning to absolute hell breaking loose. The mods had already flagged his post. Some anonymous tip got sent to some official-looking inbox. Next thing you know, there's a formal investigation launched into his college application. At first, Avi thought he could just delete the post and pretend nothing happened. Nope. Internet's forever, buddy. Screenshots were already circulating faster than gossip in a small town. And then, this is where it gets spicy, his university actually called him in for a routine meeting. Except it wasn't routine. He walked into a room with 2 university officials and a guy in a suit. Badge flashing. Stern faces. No coffee offered. You know you're screwed when nobody even pretends to be polite anymore. Apparently, the grieving son was now officially under investigation for fraud. Scholarships? Revoked. Admission? Under review. Visa? Now hanging by a thread. And Avi? Sitting there like a deer in headlights, realizing he'd basically pressed the self-destruct button on his own life. He told me later, through someone else, obviously, I'm not friends with him, that at that moment, it felt like the ground literally disappeared under his feet. Shock first. Then terror. Then, just this bone-deep, icy kind of sadness. The kind where you know you did this to yourself, and nobody's coming to save you. And buddy, this was only the beginning of the emotional freefall. So after about a week of radio silence, Avi decided he wasn't just going to sit there and let life curb stomp him. Nope. He cooked up a genius, absolutely moronic, plan. He figured, if I confess everything to the university myself, maybe they'll go easy on me. Like, dude thought a heartfelt apology would somehow erase faking a death, lying on official documents, getting scholarships under false pretenses, and violating immigration law. Yeah, nah. But he still went for it. Scheduled a meeting with the dean. Walked in there all nervous but trying to act like some tragic hero doing the right thing. Told them everything. Even brought evidence, screenshots of his Reddit confession, emails he faked, the works, trying to spin it like, look, see how honest I'm being now? The dean? Stone-faced. The immigration officer sitting in the room? Not even blinking. There was no thank you for your bravery moment. No soft music swelling in the background. Instead, they handed him a piece of paper. Notice of immediate dismissal and revocation of student visa. Translation. Pack your bags, bro. You're done. He had 30 days to leave the country voluntarily, or they were going to deport his ass the hard way. And in that moment, all that fake bravery cracked. He broke down right there, ugly, crying, begging, saying he just wanted a chance. But there are some lines you can't uncross, no matter how many tears you shed. And that was the first time, he later said, that he realized he wasn't the victim. He was the villain. So after getting completely nuked by the university and immigration, Avi still had one more nightmare waiting for him. Telling his parents. You gotta understand, Avi's family wasn't just your average immigrant family. They were the golden standard back home. Hardworking, respected, the kind of people who proudly told everyone, our son is going to an Ivy League school in America. Yeah. Imagine being that family. And then getting a phone call that your son is getting kicked out of the country for lying about your death. Apparently, Avi didn't even tell them himself at first. They got a letter. From the school. Official. Cold. Brutal. Explaining everything. His mom had a breakdown. Like, ambulance needed kind of breakdown. His dad straight up disowned him. I heard, through a mutual connection, that his dad told relatives, I have no son. Not the dramatic I'm mad at you kind. The forever kind. The you have dishonored our family and you are dead to us kind. Avi tried calling them, texting, even begging through WhatsApp voice notes. No answer. Just cold silence. And a single message from his dad. Do not return to this house. Bro was about to be deported and homeless. In one swoop. The guilt? It ate him alive. He said later he couldn't even look at himself in the mirror without wanting to punch it. That was the moment he realized. This wasn't just about getting caught. It was about destroying the people who loved him for nothing but clout and a shortcut. And trust me, the betrayals didn't stop there. You'd think by now Avi would have hit maximum humiliation, right? Wrong. There was one final, deliciously ironic twist. Remember how this whole mess started because he confessed on Reddit? Well, after his post blew up and the authorities got involved, people on that subreddit, the very place he thought was his safe space, turned on him like wolves smelling blood. At first, it was just memes. Dead Dad speedrun any percent. Congrats bro, you unlocked the deported achievement. But then it got uglier. Screenshots of everything, his post, the comments, even DMs he had sent to some randoms asking for sympathy, all went viral. Avi's real name? Leaked. Photos of him from his school's Instagram page? Posted everywhere. The dude who tipped off the authorities? Turns out he was one of the subreddit's own moderators. Some middle-aged guy who apparently had a personal hate boner for college fraud cases. Seriously, what are the odds? So not only did Avi get ratted out by strangers, he got set up by the very community he thought would protect him. You could practically see the karma points rolling in as people roasted him alive. He went from sad confession to cautionary tale in less than 48 hours. And you know what's the real kicker? Even after everything, the dismissal, the visa cancellation, the family disowning him, what hurt him most was being humiliated online. Seeing his name become a punchline. Becoming the villain of a story he thought would make people feel sorry for him. Welcome to the internet, buddy. No mercy. No second chances. Just screenshots and memes forever. So, after getting dragged all over Reddit, Twitter, TikTok, hell, probably even LinkedIn at this point, Avi decided he needed to do some damage control. And when I say damage control, I mean he cooked up the worst idea imaginable. He wrote a public apology letter. Yeah. Avi thought that posting a 2,000-word essay, full of cliches like "I was young and made mistakes and this doesn't define who I am" was going to somehow win people back. Bro basically tried to cancel his own cancellation with a Notes app apology. Skull. He posted it everywhere he could: Reddit, Medium, random forums. Even tried emailing it to his old professors and classmates like he was on some kind of sorry tour. And God, it was bad. He blamed mental health issues, academic pressure, cultural expectations. Basically everything except just admitting he was selfish and greedy. People weren't having it. Screenshots of the apology got turned into memes within minutes. One guy even edited it into a fake McDonald's ad. "I'm sorry. Can I still have my Happy Meal?" The comments sections were savage. Bro, you faked your dad's death, not your mental breakdown. And the worst part? Instead of sympathy, all Avi did was remind everyone he existed. Reigniting the fire he was so desperate to put out. It was like watching a man set himself on fire. Then throw gasoline on it thinking it was water. At that point, even the tiny handful of people who felt a little bad for him? Gone. Everyone officially hated him. And Avi realized something that absolutely broke him. Sometimes, there's no coming back. No PR stunt. No forgiveness arc. Just consequences. After the apology letter flopped harder than a fish out of water, Avi clung to one last desperate hope. An immigration appeal. Apparently, if you get your visa revoked, there's this tiny loophole where you can appeal based on extreme hardship. You gotta prove that deportation would basically destroy your life beyond repair. And Avi? He thought he had a shot. Pulled together a shaky case with a lawyer some family friend recommended. Talking about how he had no job back in India, no support system, mental health issues, blah blah blah. Filed the paperwork. Paid a stupid amount in legal fees, money he didn't have, by the way. And then, waited. And waited. And spiraled. Because when you're sitting there with your entire future dangling by a thread, every hour feels like a year. Then the decision came. Appeal denied. In one short, brutally cold letter, the government basically said, "You lied, you cheated, you disrespected the terms of your visa. You're not a victim here. Pack your bags." There was no second hearing. No extensions. No sympathy. He had 14 days to leave the country. Voluntarily. Or face forced deportation with a permanent ban from re-entry. The lawyer called him after and basically said, "It's over, man. Take the voluntary exit while you still can." You're radioactive now. And Avi? He just sat there. Didn't cry. Didn't scream. Just stared at the wall, dead-eyed, realizing that every single door was now officially slammed shut in his face. All the lies, all the fake sympathy, all the shortcut chasing. Led him exactly here. Alone, broke, disgraced, and about to be sent back to a country where nobody even wanted him anymore. Departure day came faster than Avi could process. 1 minute he was trying to stall reality with cheap takeout and bad Netflix binges. The next, he was standing in his empty dorm room, 2 sad little suitcases by his feet. No farewell party. No friends waving goodbye. No professors shaking hands and wishing him luck. Hell, even the guy at the front desk barely looked up when he handed in his keycard. It was like he already didn't exist. Just a ghost moving through the hallways. He booked the cheapest ticket he could find, economy class, middle seat, one way to Mumbai. No goodbye messages from family. Not even a safe flight. Just radio silence. At the airport, he sat in the terminal like a zombie. No music. No scrolling on his phone. Just existing. Waiting for the final nail in the coffin. When his boarding group was called, he stood up, looked around one last time. Like he half expected someone to show up, pull a movie moment, say, "Come back, all is forgiven." But nobody came. Of course nobody came. He walked onto that plane alone, sat down between 2 strangers who didn't know him, didn't care about him, and wouldn't remember him 5 minutes after landing. As the wheels lifted off the runway, Avi stared out the window. Watching the country he had lied and cheated his way into shrink into nothing. And that's when it really hit him. There was no coming back. Not just to America, but to who he used to be. He wasn't Avi the bright student anymore. He wasn't Avi the proud son. He was just the cautionary tale. The plane touched down in Mumbai just after midnight. Hot, sticky air poured into the cabin the second they cracked the door open. Avi hadn't been back in years. And it didn't even feel like home anymore. He shuffled through immigration like a ghost. Passport stamped without a word. No welcome back. No questions. Just another body in the crowd. When he stepped out into arrivals, dragging his sad little suitcases behind him, he froze. He had no one waiting for him. No family. No old friends. Nobody. He texted his dad, just a single word, "Landed." No response. After standing there like an idiot for half an hour, he finally called a cheap cab service. The driver barely spoke to him. Didn't have to. Avi was too busy having a full-on panic attack in the back seat anyway. And when he finally got to the place he used to call home, the gates were locked. Lights off. Nobody came out. He rang the bell. Waited. Rang again. Finally, a neighbor, an old uncle who used to slip him candy when he was a kid, peeked over the wall and said, "Your father told us not to let you in. You are not welcome here." That hit harder than anything else. He didn't cry. Didn't beg. Just turned around, dragging his bags down the dark street with no plan, no home, and nowhere to go. And that's when it really sank in. Avi wasn't just kicked out of America. He was kicked out of everything. He wasn't going to start over like he kept telling himself. He was starting with nothing. Avi spent the next few days wandering Mumbai like a lost soul. He tried calling old friends, people he used to hang out with, people who had his back when things were good. But the replies were either empty or downright cold. "You've been gone too long." "Sorry, bro. I heard about what happened." Even the ones who didn't outright say it, the ones who didn't even bother to respond, made it clear with their silence that Avi was now a stranger. A disappointment. He moved into a dingy little guest house on the edge of town. Not because he had any other option, but because it was cheap, and they didn't ask too many questions. For the first time in a long while, he wasn't pretending. He wasn't Avi the Ivy League hopeful. He wasn't even Avi the son. He was just a guy in a rundown room with peeling paint on the walls, trying to figure out how to survive. The money he'd saved up? Gone. He used it to survive for a few weeks, and after that, he was down to whatever he could make by doing odd jobs, driving a rickshaw, delivering packages. Anything to keep food in his stomach. And through all of it, there was no comforting hand. No family coming through with a "don't worry, we'll get through this." His father wasn't sending any second chances speech. Avi was completely on his own now. Every single day was a struggle. And the worst part was that it didn't seem like there was an end to it. He wasn't even sure what he was working toward. Trying to rebuild? Sure. But rebuild what? His reputation? His family? Both were long gone. He spent nights lying awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how he went from having everything to losing it all. After a few months of scraping by, Avi started to get tired of feeling sorry for himself. He'd hit rock bottom, sure, but that didn't mean he had to stay there. He found a small tech startup that was willing to take him on as a low-level intern. It wasn't glamorous, and the pay was next to nothing, but it was a step up from delivering packages and driving rickshaws. For the first time in a long time, Avi felt like maybe, just maybe, he could rebuild. He started putting in 12-hour days, absorbing everything he could. No shortcuts this time. No faking. Just hard work. And for a brief, fleeting moment, it felt good. The work wasn't easy, but it was real. He was learning. He was earning. And he was slowly starting to feel like he was becoming a new version of himself. Not the old Avi, the one who lied, cheated, and ran from his mistakes. But a new Avi. A person who didn't need to fake his way through life. Then came the twist. It wasn't just the company that had its eyes on him. One day, his phone buzzed with a notification from an unfamiliar number. He opened the message to find a link. This should explain everything. Curious, Avi clicked on it. It led him to a Reddit post. The title: Avi Patel, the Ivy League fraud. What happened next? This time, though, it wasn't just about his past. Someone, an old classmate from the university he'd been kicked out of, had found his new life in Mumbai. And they were making it their mission to expose him again. The post was a mix of personal details, speculation, and even a few screenshots of his new workplace. It didn't just drag up his past, it was like they were stalking him. Trying to destroy the tiny bit of peace he'd fought so hard to find. He sat there, reading the post, completely frozen. This wasn't just some random person online. This was someone from his past deliberately trying to destroy whatever shred of dignity he had left. It felt like every single step forward he'd made was now crashing down. That Reddit post hit Avi like a freight train. It wasn't just a random attack, it felt personal. This person knew where he worked, knew where he lived, knew just enough about him to ruin whatever stability he'd built. But there was something deeper that crushed him. It wasn't the online hate. It wasn't even the constant reminders of his mistakes. It was the fact that for once, he was finally working hard to make things right. And someone out there wanted to tear it all down. It felt like the universe was just waiting for him to slip up. Just waiting for him to fall so they could point and laugh again. He could have run. He could have hidden. He could have quit his job, moved to another city, and tried to start all over again. But deep down, Avi knew that wouldn't fix anything. It would only prolong the pain. Instead, he did the only thing he could think of. He confronted it. He posted a long message in the same subreddit that had exposed him the first time. Not a letter begging for forgiveness. Not a weak apology. But the truth. The whole truth. His mistakes. His regrets. And, more importantly, the fact that he was no longer the same person who had made those choices. "I've made terrible mistakes," he wrote. "I don't deserve forgiveness. But I'm not running anymore. I'm owning up to it." Avi didn't care if people laughed, if they ridiculed him or called him a liar again. He just couldn't keep hiding. This was the only way he could finally move forward, even if it meant tearing down the last bit of pride he had left. The response was mixed. Some people tore into him, of course. But there was also something else. A small but growing group of people who actually respected him for owning it. Who appreciated the honesty, even if it didn't erase his mistakes. It wasn't a happy ending. It wasn't a quick fix. But it was a step forward. For the first time in a long while, Avi started to believe that maybe, just maybe, he could rebuild his life. The response to his Reddit post was a mixed bag, but the support he received, however small, gave him a flicker of hope. It was a step in the right direction. At least people knew he wasn't the same person anymore. But life, as it often does, threw one last curveball. One evening, as he was wrapping up work at the startup, a man walked into the office. He looked like he didn't belong there. Expensive suit, clean-shaven, all business. Avi didn't recognize him, but the man walked straight up to him. "Are you Avi Patel?" he asked, his voice sharp. Avi nodded, cautious. "Yeah. Who's asking?" The man didn't waste time. "I'm from a law firm," he said, handing over a business card. "And you need to come with me." It hit Avi like a punch to the gut. His first thought? This is it. They found out about my past. They're going to ruin everything. The man was already on his phone, tapping away, not even looking at him. "Somebody wants to talk to you. You're being summoned for a legal matter." Avi's stomach dropped. Was it the immigration people again? A lawsuit from the university? Had his old life finally caught up with him? But there was one thing he didn't expect. When they reached the office, the lawyer slid a pile of documents across the table. "Your father has passed away," the lawyer said, quietly. "I'm sorry for your loss. He left instructions for you to receive the inheritance." Avi's world tilted. His father? His estranged father, who hadn't even answered his calls in months. A part of him felt like he didn't even care. He barely knew the man anymore, not after everything that had happened. But then, as the lawyer continued to speak, Avi realized the gravity of what this meant. The inheritance wasn't just money. It was the final tether to his past, to the family, to the person he once was. It was an opportunity for a fresh start, for something better. But with that opportunity came a choice. Did he take the money and use it to rebuild his life, possibly on shaky ground? Or did he turn it down, knowing that accepting it might feel like he was going back to the same old ways of cheating and taking shortcuts? The decision was harder than anything he'd faced in a long time. Avi sat there in that lawyer's office, staring at the pile of documents in front of him. The inheritance was significant, a life-changing sum of money. But it wasn't just money that was being handed to him. It was the chance to reclaim some semblance of normalcy. To fix the broken ties with his past, or at least start trying. But as he looked at the papers, something inside him clicked. For so long, he had been running from consequences, running from mistakes. He had used lies and shortcuts to get ahead, but this was different. This was real. And real wasn't something he could cheat his way through anymore. "Take it," the lawyer said, breaking the silence. "It's yours. Your father's will. You've got a right to it." But Avi wasn't sure if he had the right to anything anymore. The lawyer stood up to leave, but Avi stayed seated. The weight of that decision pressed down on him like 1,000 bricks. Would taking the inheritance be the ultimate redemption? Or would it just be another way for him to escape the reality of who he'd become? As he sat there, another thought surfaced, something his father had once told him when he was younger, before everything fell apart. If you want to be a man, you have to learn when to stand up and own what you've done. No matter how hard it gets. For the first time in ages, Avi felt the truth of those words sink in. He didn't need the inheritance to feel whole. He didn't need the money to prove he was worthy of redemption. What he needed was to stop running. To stop trying to fix things by avoiding the hard work. To own his past, his mistakes, and whatever future came from it. With a deep breath, Avi stood up, signed the papers, and handed them back to the lawyer. I'm going to pass, he said quietly. I don't need this money to move forward. I need to build myself again without shortcuts, without lies. The lawyer looked at him, stunned for a second, before nodding. Your choice, he said. But I'll let you know, this might be the hardest thing you've ever done. Abbey walked out of that office, feeling lighter than he had in years. Maybe he was still broken. Maybe he was still lost. But he was finally on a path that felt like his own. And that, for once, felt like enough. The end.